they'll catch you on the end and say that your carry-on is $65 both ways. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. It's Noreen. If you're new, thanks for watching, and if you're returning, as always, welcome back. Today we're going to be learning how I book cheap flights. That's how I get to go on so many trips. I try to look for the cheapest flight possible, and I'm going to show you a couple of things that I do to make sure that I not only get a cheap flight, but I also get what I want. So if you're interested in learning how I do this, keep on watching. Okay, so the first thing that I do when I'm looking up flights is I pull up all of the sites that I want to look at, tab after tab next to each other. So I'll go on Expedia, Priceline, I'll go on JetBlue, Delta, Southwest, and even Google, and I'll have them in a row on the same tab. So that way I can flip back and forth between each one. I'll put in all of the same information for all of them, and I can really see if there's actually a deal, or if that's just the price, or if it's better getting it on a website versus on like Expedia or something like that. I will have them all back to back, and as I'm narrowing down the flights that I'm about to take, I'll click off those tabs that I'm not using anymore. So let's say I go and I see that I have, Expedia, Priceline, I'll have Southwest and JetBlue or something like that, and I'll see that Southwest has the most expensive flights and none of the flights I see there work for what I want. I'll just completely close that tab off, and I know that I'm done with that airline. But if they're still within ranging prices that I'm okay with, then I'll keep those tabs up while I go and do like a more in-depth search of each page. There are some flights like Cheap Flights and Kayak that kind of do that for you. You put in your destination and they'll bring up all the websites that have flights on them, and pretty much you click it and then it'll come up in like a little like, I don't know, it'll pretty much do the same thing, even though it's not in the same tabs. It'll be like separate tabs but all out through your screen. I don't particularly like doing that because it gets a little spammy. There's a bunch of like ads and pop-ups and stuff that I don't particularly care for. So I rather, be in control of what I'm doing, and I know the sites that I like to go to, so I don't really use that one, but it is an option if you don't really know where to look, to be honest, or if I don't know. I would say that's the only really reason I would do that. If I didn't know what site, or if you're really struggling to find a cheap flight and you're tapped out of your normal resources, maybe you can try one of the other sites that they suggest and try it on there. But personally, I think it's really spammy and I don't like using that site. Okay, so I work from home. Love it, by the way. But I work from home, so I have a pretty flexible schedule on when I can fly. It's not like I'm in office. I usually can, check my emails while I'm on the road and do work from my laptop and connect to my Wi-Fi. But that being said, I'm not really locked down to like a Thursday, Friday schedule, or just a schedule at all. I do try to book after work or weekends if possible. But if not, I can pretty much fly on any day of the week. And if this applies to you also, and you're really flexible with your flight days, even with just like if you have vacation that you can just take anytime, I would suggest going on the airline's best fare finder first. So you can put in, to and from location, if it's round trip or one way, and then it'll bring up like a calendar of when the days are cheapest to fly. So just keep in mind though, like in this calendar, it's not like all the flights that day are cheap, but it will show you the cheapest flight. And if the cheapest flight works with your schedule, whether it might be a 3 o'clock flight on a Tuesday or a 7 o'clock flight on a Friday, it will show you the cheapest flight. You just have to kind of dig down and see which flight in that day is the cheapest, because it's not all of them for that day. It's just the cheapest one that they found in that day. But that's also an option if you're a little bit more flexible. I use that a lot too, instead of doing like a direct this day or that day. I believe like Expedia and Priceline, they have something similar. If you're flexible, you don't have to fly on this day. They'll show you a couple of days where it is cheaper as well. They'll show you like a little breakdown. I usually start off on the airline's site first before I go into delving into that on Expedia. Staying in line with flexibility, if you really just want to go on vacation and you're just like, I don't care where, I don't care when, it needs to be sometime coming up, but I just need a vacation, and you really want to get a cheap flight, you can go on Google. Don't put in a date, don't put in a month, don't put in like a location. All you have to do is put in your zone. Like let's say if you want to go to Asia, Europe, South America or in America, and just put it in and leave everything else blank, it will bring up the cheapest flights to the locations that you might not have even thought of. There are some really cheap flights. I have not looked recently, but I will put some on a screen of like a couple of flights that I found that are just like random places that I would definitely want to go. And as long as you're flexible with your time and date and airline that you want to take, they have some really good prices. So I also would recommend that if you really just like, I just want to go somewhere and I don't know where, and it's gonna be an adventure. That's a great way to find something cheap and fun, really. Like, it's exciting to not just plan I wouldn't say it's not exciting to plan because I am a planner, but it's exciting to be like, I never thought of this place. Let me try it out. Do your research first before you just go booking it to some crazy place. But that's also a good idea as well. These next two tips I mentioned in my last video, so I'm going to just speed past it a little bit. If you haven't seen it already, it's how to have a stress-free travel experience, especially during the holidays. I will link it up above. But just to get it out there in line with booking cheap flights. Number one, make sure you travel on off-peak days such as Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Saturday you might not think, but most people are already in their destination by Saturday, so it's a little bit cheaper to fly. And Tuesday and Wednesday, most people are still at work. A lot of people try to travel out Thursday and Friday and Monday to come back home for an extended weekend. So if you can try to get those Tuesday, Wednesday, or Saturday flights, they're typically cheaper. Also, try to check your departure airport. If you can get an airport that is a little bit more off the grid, there's sometimes, it can be up in the air, but most of the times it's a little bit cheaper, such as I live in New York. Our main airports are LaGuardia and JFK. But if you really need a cheap flight, Newark is right there, and it's typically cheaper to fly out from Newark. My only thing with that is you still have to keep in mind any travel times or travel prices to get to that airport instead of coming to one that's closer to you. Besides that, it's typically cheaper to fly out from some of the smaller airports that's not as well used. Nonstop versus layover flights. Okay, so it really depends on where you're going and if you need that layover flight. There's some times where you can't get to your location without having a layover. There's some places where, like in Greece or in the Maldives or something, where you literally cannot get to that island without that layover flight. But I always try to go for nonstop. I'd rather just be on the flight and then be done with it. Are they usually more expensive? Sometimes. I would say they're more expensive the closer you get to your flight. So we already know that we should be booking our flights in advance, a good amount in advance. I shouldn't even have to say it, but I'm saying it now. I'm saying it now. But if you can't get it well enough in advance, yeah, the nonstop flights, if you're trying to book a week before, they're gonna be more expensive because now they're a luxury. But if you can't, and if that's the case, then you'd be able to get a layover flight that's probably a little bit cheaper. However, if you're going further out and you're booking it in advance, like you should be, because we do everything in advance on this channel, then you should be able to get a nonstop flight for pretty much the same price, if not cheaper than your layover flight. Okay, another thing to check when we are looking for these flights is if it has your baggage needs. Now some of these flights don't include your carry-on anymore. A lot before did include a carry-on, but certain flights, Frontier, Spirit, even JetBlue as their basic flights, don't include carry-on bags anymore. So if you're someone who knows you need a carry-on bag, I would definitely keep in mind if that's what you need when you're booking your flight. A lot of the times it's cheaper if you can get either an airline that gives you a free carry-on, or if you pay for your carry-on up front, it's a lot cheaper to do it that way. Yeah, you might get a Spirit flight that is $35. Let's just say, because Spirit's like that sometimes. But they'll catch you on the end and say that your carry-on is $65 both ways. And it's really not cheaper when it comes down to it. So I would just keep an eye on that. I also want to say the earlier you pay for your carry-on, the better as well. As soon as you start getting closer, the price goes up. If you wait till you're in the airline, it's gonna be at a premium price. So try not to do it the day of. If you really need that cheap flight and you just need to buy the flight at this time, you need that $70 round trip ticket, and you feel like you can just push off the carry-on or your checked luggage, then that's definitely an option just to get that flight in there, just to have it booked and set. But keep in mind that you're gonna have to pay for those fees for either a checked luggage or a carry-on bag. Sometimes people ask me if it's better to buy on Expedia and Priceline versus the airline website, and it really depends on a couple of things. Number one, it depends on if it's the same price. Sometimes you'll look on Expedia and Priceline and it will be cheaper than it is on the flight or the airline website. So if that's the case, obviously you're gonna go with Expedia or Priceline. Number two, it depends on if you're using that same airline both ways. If it's a round trip ticket, are you flying both there and back with that same airline? If you are and it's the same price, then yes, I would jump over and buy it on the airline's website, because then I can have my flight already loaded up there instead of having to manually put it in later after I got my confirmation from Expedia. Number two, I feel like I get my points faster. I don't feel like I always get my points, my airline points, when I use Expedia or Priceline. So in that case, I would rather buy it on their airline's website. Number three, I don't really know what the bonuses are for Expedia and Priceline. I know I never use them, so I would rather have the points on my airline than on Expedia, where I know I'm probably not going to use it, if it's anything even good, because I've never used their points before. I'm gonna have to look more into that. Times where I wouldn't say that it's good to go and jump on their airline website is if, obviously, if it's more expensive. There's no point of doing that. Like, the whole point of this is to get the cheap flight. If it's more expensive, stay on Priceline or Expedia. Number two, if you have different flights going one way and another way, like let's say you take JetBlue one way, Southwest back. That is like, now you're doing too much work to go and buy on this website and then go and buy on that website. That's what Expedia is for, bundling it and doing it all together. Again, with like layovers too, you're not gonna sit there and buy a flight. Like, that's what Expedia and Priceline are for getting the best price and combinations of flights. That's what those websites are for. So if you're using multiple flights or multiple airlines, then yes, buy it on the airline like Expedia or Priceline or Kayak or whatever search engine for flights that you're using. Just buy it there because it'll be a lot easier. While we're on the topic of points, check your debit and credit card points. If you have airline miles for a certain airline as part of your benefits of using your card, use it, because you could get your flight for little to nothing if you have enough miles. Why spend cash if you can just spend your points? That's what those points are for. So don't exclude that. Make sure if you do have that as a benefit of your cards that you check that before you book a flight too, because we're all for saving coin here. This is the whole point. Lastly, I wouldn't say skip the travel insurance. This is all a personal choice. I don't want to go and tell someone to skip the travel insurance and then they do, and they're somewhere and they can't get their money back and they can't get a refund. So don't listen to me. Do what you want to do for your travel insurance. For me personally, if I'm just going to Florida, if I'm going a couple states away, I don't get travel insurance. Like, it's 99.999% of the time unneeded for me. If you're someone who your schedule changes a lot, if you're prone to get sick or whatever that you think you might need it, by all means, go for it. I'm not telling you it's not worth it. I'm just saying that I don't get it. The only time that I probably would get travel insurance is if I'm going to Europe, if I'm spending a lot of money on a flight. If I'm spending a lot of money in the flight, like hundreds of dollars, best believe I'm gonna get that $50 travel insurance. But if I'm spending $120, it's not happening. It's not worth it. Not for that. Like, I'll just take the L. And most of the time I don't need to. So that's why I feel so flippant about it. But again, do what makes you happy. Do what makes you feel comfortable. This is just my opinion and what I do. You can go ahead and do whatever you want. Okay guys, so that's the end of my tips. Here is the final product of what I found for my flight to Florida from New York. I'm going about a month and a half out from when I'm taking this flight, and I'm only spending $148 round trip. I think that's pretty good. And it includes my carry-on bags because, as you guys know, I love my carry-on bag. But I hope you guys all found this video helpful. If you have any questions, make sure you leave it below. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what your next trip is and if any of these tips helps you in getting your next flight. And I will see you guys later. Bye.